The homeless man in the alley looks down at his arm, wide-eyed in horror. Is his skin moving? It almost seems to bubble, like water coming to a boil. He's experiencing a kind of pain he can't even imagine. He can feel something moving up against his bones, chewing through the calcium. He can't move. They're everywhere inside him, just eating. He opens his mouth to scream, but they've already chewed too many holes through his lungs for him to make a sound. Within the hour, he will be dead. But what's killing him? The store owner pulls a gleaming, serrated-edge knife from the knife block, and with deft, practiced hands, he slices a delicious ciabatta roll in two. From there, he butters the bread, slices a juicy pair of New York steaks into thick, medium-rare chunks, adds in some diced vegetables and lettuce leaves, sprinkles on just a pinch of lime zest, and hey presto, he's got a delectable Caribbean-style pork sandwich. It's a thing of beauty, but he can't help but feel it's missing something. Oh, that's it. The thought hits him like a lightning bolt. This sandwich would be delicious, but it'd also be far too dry. How could he have made such a rookie mistake? He saunters across the kitchen and reaches into one of the many luxuriously appointed cabinets, feeling around for one of the many jars of mayonnaise he's got stowed away in there. He twists off the cap with a pleasing pop and spreads a little mayo onto the sandwich. It looks positively delicious, and he wastes no time in placing it pride of place in the display case. Everything is moving along perfectly. Boston is a foodie town. That's what the store owner tells himself as he flips around the sign on the door from closed to open for the very first time. After years working as a chef in other people's restaurants, the store owner has racked up the experience to strike out on his own and achieve his dream: a boutique sandwich store on the Boston waterfront, where tourists from hither and yon would be able to enjoy artisanal sandwiches while browsing the city's many historic locales. His employees are busying themselves around the store. They're all people he personally interviewed and selected. They all aligned with his mission and had a passion for sandwiches. One wipes down the tables in prep for the inevitable rush of customers when it turns lunchtime. Another is artfully posing a selection of pre-made sandwiches behind a sheet of glass at the counter. Leg ham and strong cheese, BLT, tuna mayo, and, of course, lobster. We can't forget that this is Boston after all. But as the hours creep on, something horrible happens. Nobody shows up. The store owner doesn't know what he's done wrong. He managed to pay for an ad about the grand opening in one of the local papers and released some coupons in a local food magazine too. He even put a grand opening sign and garland in the window, showing off the grand opening discount. For every sandwich a customer buys, they'll get another half off. But it seems that none of this conventional business wisdom actually shook out. His optimism wanes as the course of the day passes, and though they're all keeping up brave faces, he can see the doubt in the eyes of his employees, too. All of their minds are bubbling with the same terrifying thought, too awful to ever be spoken aloud. This whole thing has been a complete bust. When closing time comes, the store owner gathers his employees together to give him a pep talk, hoping to assuage all their fears about potentially losing their new jobs the same week they got them. He gives an inspiring speech about the importance of perseverance and grit and sticking to their dreams, despite the fact that there may be discouraging setbacks along the way. As he listens to himself talking, it occurs to him that these are the words he needs to hear, as much as they are the words he needs to say. But after they've all gone home, he's left alone, looking at the uneaten sandwiches in the display case. The anxiety of the day has killed any hope of his appetite, and then it dawns on him. Those sandwiches are going to be stale by tomorrow. All his hard work, all his passion, and he's going to need to throw them out. He takes the Caribbean pork sandwich first and morosely exits out of the back door. He sees the dumpster around the back of the building, but he also sees something else. A homeless man, looking cold and hungry, wrapped in dirty sheets deep in the alley. And in that moment, he has an idea. Perhaps he can still serve a hungry person today. The store owner offers his precious sandwich to the homeless man, who gratefully accepts. Deciding it would be a terrible waste to just throw food away while there was a man going hungry behind his building, he gives all the sandwiches from the display case to the homeless man, who acts like it's the first time someone has been kind to him in many, many years. He eats every single sandwich and tells the store owner that it's one of the tastiest meals he's ever had. Clearly, when it comes to making sandwiches, the store owner has a gift. In one moment, he's reminded of why he does this, making people happy with food. He has no idea that, in a sense, He's just murdered the man who rekindled his passion. The next day, things change for the better. With renewed passion and vigor for the art of making and selling delicious sandwiches to tourists and the Boston public, he puts his all into the sandwich business, and Lady Luck responds. A few customers each day at first, and then the place becomes a local curiosity, the subject of online write-ups and must-visit in Boston lists. There are familiar faces that he sees every single day, and it's only a matter of weeks until he needs to start implementing a waiting list for customers. Business is booming, and despite his sudden and miraculous success, the store owner never forgets what sparked his second wind. He owes it all to the homeless man out behind the store, who reminded him of his true purpose. One day, he decides he needs to repay his old friend. He whips up a delicious tuna mayo sub and steps outside to give it to the homeless man. But the man is gone. It's strange. He's left some crumpled clothes behind, and the piece of cardboard he'd always sleep on. But the man is gone. The store owner steps forward, concerned for the man's safety. It had been a particularly cold and unforgiving winter after all, but he sees something instead that utterly disgusts him. In amongst the scattered clothes, there's a worm-like creature, glistening white and about a foot long. It lays there in the pile of clothes, mercifully dead. But the mere sight of it so revolts the store owner that he drops the tuna mayo sub onto the ground, splattering it across the asphalt. It's a terrible waste of food, but after seeing that disgusting worm thing, he doesn't have any kind of appetite for the rest of the day. If that's as terrible as this whole thing got, it would have been bad enough. But the floodgates of terror are about to open, and when it does, only a certain organization has the tools to close it. The store owner starts noticing strange things at work after that. Something about the regulars. Some of them seem kind of strange and doughy. They've got pallid skin and a vacant look behind their eyes. Some of them who've ordered the same sandwich day after day, who've memorized the menus by heart, are taking full minutes to decide what they want to order, as though the workings of their very minds have been gummed up. As disturbing as these strange little signs are, they're nothing compared to the nightmarish things a number of Boston EMTs and emergency room doctors were encountering around that same time. People collapsing in their homes in a state of extreme pain, their panicked friends and spouses calling in, crying and unable to explain what's happening to their formerly healthy loved ones. This, of course, would be disturbing enough, but what happens to these people after being taken in takes it to a whole other level. In every single case, the technicians see something moving under their skin. They take x-rays, ultrasounds, or in some cases, even make incisions, and the result is always the same. The bodies of the people experiencing these symptoms are full of thousands upon thousands of white worms, eating their innards from within, slowly killing them in perhaps the most painful way imaginable. Even seasoned doctors are passing out from sheer horror when they see the masses of impossible white parasites wriggling within their patients. The one piece of vital information they don't have is that all these victims had recently eaten at a certain up-and-coming sandwich store on the Boston Harbor. After 10 weeks of business, things are starting to cool down again for the sandwich store. The owner thinks that's to be expected. That opening FOMO hype can't go on forever. But the mysterious absence of some of his most loyal repeat customers is undeniably a little disturbing to him. Is it something he did wrong? Did he somehow alienate them? These thoughts are plaguing his mind when he's alone in the store one evening, cleaning up after everyone else has gone home. His thoughts are so occupied that, as he's preparing to screw the top back onto a jar of mayonnaise, he accidentally drops it. The jar stays intact, but a large, disgusting blob of mayo splatters out onto the floor. Great, now he has to clean that up. He picks up the jar and takes it into the back alley, where he intends to throw it into the dumpster. With half of it spilled out onto the ground, it's too much of a hygiene risk for him to keep it in the restaurant anymore. But before he can throw it into the trash, his arm freezes in a moment of inexplicable hesitation. In that strange moment, it occurs to him that it's the only one in the cabinet of that particular brand. He's used it on so many sandwiches before, and yet he's never needed to buy a new jar of it either. On a pure whim, he decides to inspect it closer. The label on the back of the jar reads, "Water, vegetable oil, vinegar, eggs, 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 eat eggs, be eggs. Your flesh is but the nursery and sustenance of our incalculable ravenous mouths. Eat eggs, consume us. Let us be realized within you. Sugar, salt, lemon juice, and love." Oh, he thinks to himself, that isn't good. Without a second's delay, he runs back into the sandwich store, wondering with horror just what exactly he'd been feeding his customers all this time. But these thoughts are interrupted when he sees that the mess of mayonnaise is somehow gone from the floor. He didn't clean it up, did he? Something is terribly wrong here. That's the only thing he knows for certain. He may not even be safe in here. He lunges out and grabs a frying pan, the one he uses to sizzle up the steak for the store's famous Boston-style cheesesteak sandwiches, and assumes a defensive position. His instincts might just save his life here, as something watches him from the shadows. Without warning, something comes squealing towards him, about the size of a rat, with shiny, smooth, white skin, propelling itself along the ground on a collection of horrid little tendrils. It makes a horrific shrieking sound and lunges for him. Almost instinctually, he whacks it with his frying pan, sending it flying across the kitchen, where it lands against the wall with a splat. Did he just get attacked by a living blob of mayonnaise? Before he can even contemplate all the implications of that, he sees the splat slithering down the wall and gathering in a puddle on the floor. This puddle then twists and warps, taking the exact same horrible shape it had before. Tendrils sliding out of its shimmering skin. It must have formed out of the contents of almost the entire mysterious jar. And it dawns on him all at once, in every single sandwich his shop had served which contained mayonnaise, he's been putting these little monsters into people's bodies. And as the beast shakes off the shock and prepares to charge again, he's starting to worry that he might be in for the same fate. Only in Boston, right? Whether you love or despise mayonnaise, it's likely that SCP-2484, aptly titled the Parasitic Mayonnaise Worms, made you feel a little queasy. But if you're anything like the Foundation field agents who first discovered this caustic condiment, you likely have some pressing questions about what exactly you just witnessed. Thanks to my research into a number of classified files, I'm able to give you the answers, but I'm afraid I can't tell you that it won't get any less repulsive. To the untrained eye, SCP-2484 is a mayonnaise jar of indeterminate brand containing approximately 1,024 grams of a substance that, to all chemical tests, seems to be identical to regular mayonnaise. This substance, for the sake of avoiding confusion, will be referred to as SCP-2484-A. While inside the jar, SCP-2484-A poses no threat to anyone. But the second the anomalous mayonnaise leaves the jar or is consumed by a vertebrate animal, the disturbing effects you've already witnessed take hold. The jar contains an infinite quantity of this mayonnaise too. When the contents of SCP-2484 are removed, it will begin to refill by 2 milliliters every hour. Luckily for the Foundation's biohazard control units, SCP-2484-A can be destroyed in any manner that non-anomalous mayonnaise can be destroyed. Personally, I've never contemplated ways of destroying mayonnaise, so I'll leave the devising of these methods to greater minds than my own. Any quantity of SCP-2484-A less than 5 grams doesn't seem to display any anomalous properties, so if you're content with a tiny quantity of mayo on your food, you may encounter this anomaly and live to tell the tale. But masses between 5 grams and 63 grams are another story. These masses will develop a repulsive, congealed membrane, a kind of smooth, glossy skin over their body, as well as crude, tentacle-like pseudopods. These creatures will slither and crawl around without any real direction. These won't pose any threat to other organisms, so long as they don't touch or ingest them. If only the same could be said for the larger ones. Slightly larger creatures formed out of SCP-2484-A, specifically ones weighing between 63 grams and 235 grams, will move with more direction and purpose. They will seek out solid foods and potable liquids, diffusing themselves into them and infecting them with their secondary anomalous quality, which we'll discuss shortly. Needless to say, one should avoid consuming food infected in this manner at all costs. Masses of SCP-2484-A ranging from 235 grams to 804 grams take a more direct and aggressive route to infecting their hosts. They will use their pseudopods to actively seek out vertebrate animals and try to enter their body through any means necessary. From all major bodily orifices and even more novel methods of intrusion, such as pores and open wounds. But this is nothing compared to the danger presented by masses of SCP-2484-A ranging from 804 grams to 1,024 grams. These creatures are highly violent and aggressive, stopping at nothing to attack and enter vertebrate animals, going as far as forcing themselves through the victim's skin. It goes without saying that these are the most dangerous types to encounter of any of them, and you may need to brush up on your methods of destroying mayonnaise that we mentioned earlier in order to survive. But let's say, for the sake of argument, that your greatest anti-mayonnaise contingency plans have failed. The anomalous SCP-2484-A mayonnaise has entered your body in a dangerous quantity, which is to say 3 grams per every kilogram of body weight. If this describes your experience, then you're about to undergo the secondary effects of this anomaly, which I'm sorry to tell you are even more unpleasant than the primary effects. At first, the effects will appear to be relatively benign, including higher blood sugar levels, increased heart rate, slower cognition, and higher body heat. Not dissimilar to the effects of consuming a large quantity of non-anomalous mayonnaise. Within the body, however, things will be taking a considerably more drastic turn. The SCP-2484-A in the victim's body will begin to turn into small, gamete-like cells through some kind of anomalous force of metabolization. Then things will accelerate considerably. Within 3 to 6 hours, the cells will develop into tiny nematodes around a millimeter in length that begin swimming through the body. A single gram of SCP-2484-A can become around 500 of these parasitic nematodes. If that's already making your skin itch, it's going to get an awful lot worse from there. Between 5 and 40 hours after SCP-2484-A infects its hosts, whether through consumption or forceful entry, the parasitic nematodes will begin eating the host's tissues, giving them the mass to grow up to 12 centimeters long. At which point, the host is likely to experience horrific pain as they're eaten from within. When the host has been entirely devoured, the parasitic mayonnaise worms will turn on each other and start eating. After all this, only one worm will be left, measuring from 20 to 30 centimeters in length. It will then enter a dormant state and die within 4 days. As obligate parasites, the creatures spawned by SCP-2484-A are not designed to survive outside the host body after they've developed. Any worms removed from the victim's body will die within 5 hours, but no attempts thus far to save anyone infected with SCP-2484-A have been successful. Infection is, sadly, invariably lethal. Our opening tale was also the first recorded case study of SCP-2484 encountered by Foundation field agents. The source was an independent sandwich store in Boston, Massachusetts, triangulated after a series of reports of strange parasite behavior over a 10-week period. The SCP-2484 jar had been in the store's refrigerator with a number of non-anomalous mayonnaise jars, though the store's owner, when questioned by Foundation operatives, could not remember ever having bought this particular jar of mayo. How it made its way into the store is, to this day, a mystery. Once the Foundation had contained the threat, all surviving sandwich store employees were given amnestics, along with a number of medical personnel who'd also encountered the parasites. All the hosts were, of course, lost. SCP-2484 is currently classified as safe. It is kept in a standard refrigerated perishables unit, essentially a kind of high-security fridge. No more than 400 grams of the anomalous mayonnaise is allowed to be removed for experimentation at any time, and no destructive tests are authorized at this time. Any personnel hoping to access SCP-2484 need to have Level 3 access clearance or above. Condiments can be a loaded issue. I've personally witnessed arguments on the merits of ketchup, mustard, and mayonnaise that have reached greater intensity than some Keter-class containment breaches, but I'd advise you to exercise caution. Next time you make yourself a delicious BLT and you're preparing to spread some mayo across the bread, or you're wondering which flavor will perfectly accompany your next hot dog, take a second to think. You may not know what you're really putting into your body. Check out the Dr. Bob Patreon and become a junior researcher today. Now go and watch another entry from the files of Dr. Bob, like SCP-2611, Large and in Charge.